The JCPenney Mystery Sale is back for the holidays. Through Thursday, usher in huge holiday savings with our in-store coupon giveaway. You can get an extra 30, 40, or even 50% off while they last. Simply find an associate for a coupon, then peel to reveal your deal. Hurry in now to discover the savings you've been wishing for. We got your holiday. JCPenney. Coupon valid on select styles through 12/15. Exclusions apply. Giveaway in-store only. Must be 18 years or older. See store for details.
O'Reilly. Don't risk getting stranded with a bad battery. Our professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts will test your battery for free. If your battery does need to be replaced, we'll help you find the best battery for your vehicle and your budget. Don't wait until your battery is dead. Get it tested for free today at your local O'Reilly Auto Parts store.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hello, thank you for tuning in to another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. I'm your host, Bethany Moore. I'm the Director of Communications at the National Cannabis Industry Association. Today, I have a couple of my coworkers on the podcast today. We're getting toward the end of the year 2022, and our lobbying team in Washington, D.C. that represents the cannabis industry year-round on Capitol Hill has joined me on the podcast today so we can talk about what's happened during the year 2022 and just wrap things up a bit. So please allow me to introduce my coworkers, Michelle Rutter Friberg and Michael Correa. For those of you who don't know, Michelle Rutter Friberg is Deputy Director of Government Relations, and she's been with NCIA since 2014. She's a graduate of James Madison University in the year 2012, where during her studies, she held a year-long internship with Virginia House of Delegates member Tony Wilt. Michael Correa is also on the show with us today. He's the Director of Government Relations with NCIA here. And prior to joining NCIA, he spent many years working on Capitol Hill, including working for Representative George Radanovich from California, who retired in 2010, and the House Committee on Resources, serving 3 different chairmen. Previously, he was Director of Federal Affairs for the American Legislative Exchange Council, known as ALEC, and Senior Project Manager for the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. Thank you both. I know it's a busy time of year. It's busy all the time with all the exciting things happening in Congress. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I know our listeners love hearing directly from our government relations team as well. So let's kick off. First, let's jog our memories a little bit. Let's go all the way back to the state of the cannabis movement when we all began working at NCIA. That was almost 9 years ago, believe it or not. Michael, you've been here for over 9 years. And Michelle and I are also close to our 9-year anniversary working at the organization when 2 states, Colorado and Washington, were just rolling out their adult use cannabis laws for the first time. So thinking back to that time, what was the tone and temperature when it comes to pro-cannabis policy reform in the halls of Congress back then, Michael?
Well, I was hired in November of 2013, so starting my 10th year, finishing up 9, and I began lobbying on this issue and working for NCIA before there were legal sales. In Colorado, that was in January of 14, and in Washington State, July of 2014. And so it was definitely a different world. I was the only full-time cannabis industry lobbyist working on the issue. I was an island unto myself. And this was sort of a novelty on Capitol Hill. You know, the giggle factor. You represent who? And I actually had, a senator or 2 physically back away from a handshake from me when they realized who I was, like somehow it was going to be a gotcha moment, or somehow like I was some weirdo like representing the child molesters or something. And to see how far we have come to where 9 years later, We have the Senate Majority Leader introducing his own legalization bill. It just goes to show you how far this issue has come and how many lobbyists we have, full-time lobbyists, working on this issue for other trade associations and for the industry. And it's definitely matured at it as a movement. And I've been very happy watching it play out. But I'll tell you one thing: the first event I did for NCIA was early November of 2013, and Earl Blumenauer, a congressman from Oregon, had said he expected Congress to legalize cannabis by 2020. And way back in the time machine in 2013, I thought, wow, 7 years is so far into the future. And I thought legalization would take 8 to 10 years. And here we are, 9 years later. Not only have we not got legalization, we're talking about very little incremental legislation, just to show you how far we've come as the industry, but how incremental and slow reform is. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's very true. It moves at a glacial pace, as they say, right? Michelle, let's hear your memories from 2014 when you began at NCIA.
Yeah, thanks, Bethany. And thanks again for having us. Always good to be here. My recollections are really similar to Mike's, of course, being that he's been here as long as I have. And so we've experienced a lot of these things together. But the one thing that I'll also note is that, there was definitely, like Mike said, that giggle factor or sort of the eyebrow raise when you would reach out to congressional offices. But I also think that, I even think about my life personally, you know what I mean? That's a long time ago to me, looking back at how much has happened, both professionally, personally in that time. And, I remember telling my family about getting this job, and my parents are both pretty supportive at that time, were pretty supportive, and now are very supportive of cannabis, but even they were a little bit tepid. And man, I remember telling my grandparents, and I'll just leave it at my grandfather didn't have the best response. And that was difficult in our family. But the reason I say that, and all's well now for anyone concerned, but the reason I say that is that I really think that also goes to show sort of the shift that we've seen in public opinion. Public opinion on this issue has always been strong. We've seen since Gallup has started asking about marijuana, I think back in 1969, it's always kind of gradually gone up. But in the last, 10 to 15 years, we've really seen that spike up over that time. So even just thinking about how much public opinion and sort of, again, erasing that stigma has changed over that 9 years really stands out to me as well. And just about what issues we were talking about then too, I would say. Mike obviously just mentioned that incremental reform is sort of what's been on the menu recently, for better or for worse. But, also back in 2014, the conversations that we were having were just very, very different. I know later in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the White House and some research bills, but the conversations that we're having have shifted at least a little bit to actually talk about when this happens, not what if it happens. So.
Yeah, to your point, Michelle, in the mid 2000s, when I was just a cannabis activist, I had friends and acquaintances in the DC area where I lived at the time who distanced themselves from me because they were afraid of being associated with somebody who was a cannabis activist. So there you go. But back to present day and all the great work we've been doing the last few years. Lobby Days is easily my favorite NCIA event. And I think a lot of people share my sentiment. And in the pre-COVID pandemic, it was really encouraging to see year after year the number of NCIA members who would fly out to DC to do this work with us grow and grow. I believe we had 300 or more attendees at Lobby Days in the year 2019. So we're seeing more and more congressional offices take our group and our concerns seriously. Any further reflections on the Lobby Days aspect of the work that we're doing, Michael?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, show you that maturity. When I started, our first Lobby Days that I did in 2014 had 30 people. The next year was 60, and then 100, then 200. And like you said, our peak, we are 300 plus. You almost saw a doubling of Lobby Days turnout, and it was sort of mirroring just the industry as a whole doubling. And I wanted the cannabis industry to have representation, to be like every other industry in America. and every other industry in America is represented and does their fly-in, and their members come in and they talk to Capitol Hill. And, what we were doing in 2014, at the back end of a bar, having beers, discussing our lobby days, full circle to where we have 300 people in a hotel ballroom doing organized breakfasts, talking about our planning and our day, and fundraisers and press conferences, and how far we've gone over the years, of course, pre-COVID, was quite amazing. And, we really hit our peak and our stride in 2019. And it's a shame because COVID really put a damper on just lobbying and fly-ins for most industries. The Capitol, for the most part, was closed down to the public and for a lot of lobbyists like me. And so that interaction for the past, what are we now, 2.5 years, almost 3 years later,
Yeah.
still coming out of. And the thought is the Republicans in the House will open up the Capitol starting in January, which is great news for a lobbyist, just to be able to interact with staff on a personal level versus the Zoom level, because there's not that connection. And just being able to have our members fly in, meet their representatives, meet their senators, represent the industry is really important. As you mentioned, we went 3+ years without doing a lobby days. We did one in September that was very successful. I'm very happy with that. And our plan is to do another one in May of 2023 that I'm looking forward to, excited about. But, it's really good to get out there. It's really good for our members to see what we do on a day-to-day basis. And it is, the highlight of Michelle and I's year, being able to do that for our membership.
Absolutely. Michelle, anything to add on to that before we take our first commercial break?
No, I think Mike did a great job. Just what a joy Lobby Days truly is, to be able to see all of our members come out, become involved in the political process, take their First Amendment rights by the horns and be set out on the Hill. It's absolutely incredible. And the sheer number of meetings that we do is truly incredible. Even with this smaller fly-in that we did back in September, we still ended up doing, over the course of about 4 hours, we hit 100 offices or so.
Wild.
So it's really, really a wonderful way to get our members involved. And it's also a really wonderful way for members of Congress and their staff to hear directly from operators. And there's, it's great to hear from me and Mike, but there's nothing like hearing it straight from a business owner's mouth. And so hope to see everybody out here in May.
Absolutely. And we've released a couple of videos that we produced about lobby days, but there are even more videos in production that we'll be releasing between now and the next lobby days in May. All right, let's take that first commercial break, and we'll be right back to take a deeper dive with Michael and Michelle. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
The JCPenney Mystery Sale is back for the holidays. Through Thursday, usher in huge holiday savings with our in-store coupon giveaway. You can get an extra 30, 40, or even 50% off while they last. Simply find an associate for a coupon, then peel to reveal your deal. Hurry in now to discover the savings you've been wishing for. We got your holiday. JCPenney. Coupon valid on select styles through 12/15. Exclusions apply. Giveaway in-store only. Must be 18 years or older. See store for details.
Get ready, Ohio. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to the Buckeye State. And to kick things off, you can get started with $100 in free bets as an early sign-up bonus. Plus, when you sign up today with promo code OhioSB, you'll be all set for when FanDuel goes live in Ohio. Then you can bet on all your favorite teams and all your favorite sports with $100 in free bets. Just download FanDuel's top-rated sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Ohio, this is your chance to get in on the action. Join today with promo code OhioSB. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Ohio. Bonus issued in non-withdrawable free bets that expire 7 days after FanDuel accepts its first real money sports wager in Ohio on 1/1/23. Unique user identity verification required. Offer ends on the go-live date. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. We're chatting with Michael Correa and Michelle Rutter Friberg, who are NCIA's government relations team in Washington, D.C. So we are pretty close here to wrapping up the year 2022. which did feel a little more normal considering the unusual circumstances of the last couple of years that we've touched on. But in my opinion, the introduction of the CAOA in the Senate seemed to be kind of a pinnacle moment as far as what's going on in Congress. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that, Michael.
Yeah, so in previous Congresses, Senator Booker of New Jersey, Senator Wyden of Oregon, and Senator Schumer have had their own versions of legalization bills floating around. And about 2 years ago, they got together and said, instead of having multiple Senate legalization bills, let's get together. And I applaud them for working together. The last thing lobbyists need and the Hill needs are, 6 different versions of bills about everyone's different take about what's important and what's not, when they can work out some of the details behind the scenes, introduce a bill and go from there. So from that end, I'm very happy. It was a little funny when they first said they were thinking about a bill. It was February of 2021. They dropped a discussion draft. 6 months later, Michelle, they took comments on it, and then they finally introduced their bill. I think it was in June or July of this year, right before Congress was sort of winding down for the year, which I wish they had introduced a little earlier. But it's very important. Like I said, I can't say this enough. The Senate Majority Leader, who's the most powerful person in the Senate and possibly one of the most powerful, if not most powerful, members in Congress, has their own legalization bill. That means a lot from a messaging standpoint. And NCIA looked through that bill. We worked through that bill from a policy level. We gave 40 pages of comments and questions to Capitol Hill as they were forming that discussion draft. They took a lot of those thoughts into consideration in their bill. It's a very good bill. It's not a perfect bill. There is no such thing as a perfect bill. But one of the things that concerns me the most, I am here to represent the cannabis industry. And the last thing we need is legalization, and we all applaud each other. And then when the details come out, we realize it's not working, or it's unworkable, or you're not going to get the results that you were hoping for. And so I would like to work out all these issues and ask all these questions before legalization passes. And we have a lot of concerns just about the tax structures on this bill and what this would do to small businesses. NCIA represents the entire cannabis industry, but at the same time, we really focus on the small businesses, the little guys, the mom and pops who are trying to survive. And the last thing we want is with legalization is just more consolidation and having this wonderful industry not reach its potential because the taxes are too high or the regulations are too high. And it's something I want to work out before we get there. But we are years away from legalization in Congress. This is the start. The House has done a lot of work and has passed legalization bills on a couple occasions, although the Republican Congress going forward is not going to be as friendly on cannabis reform. But just having legislation out there to discuss, to comment on, to amend, to work through the process is just really important for us as a lobbyist. And it beats like what my life was like in 2014 when we were just talking about bills, trying to be serious. Now, like Michelle mentioned, it's about how we implement. It's no longer a conversation of should we do this experiment or not. It's how we roll it out, how we implement it. And that discussion has really changed.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Yeah, Michelle, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, thank you for that, Bethany and Mike. And I was just thinking, also more broadly for our listeners and for our members as well, that like you mentioned, Mike, like this is still going to be a years-long process, unfortunately, to get this done and to get it right. And what I think is important for everybody to remember is that the Senate is the upper chamber of Congress, and the Senate has always, since the country's inception, has been the more deliberative and works much slower lower than the House. And so it's just really important to remember that, because it's very, very frustrating. Trust me, I get it. I work in this every single day. It can be very frustrating not to see things happen, but this is how Congress works, or sometimes doesn't work. So I think it's important to remember that. And I also think it's important to just think about the Senate, that we still have a lot of work to do, because we still have to reach that 60 threshold. And like Mike said, we will have our work cut out for us in the Senate, certainly over the next couple of years, and in the House as well. Now with Republicans taking the House over, and we're going to be working with divided government, that certainly is going to pose its own challenges. But again, I think that this will give us a good opportunity, hopefully, to educate a lot of senators to work on KOA and start to have some of those hearings that Leader Schumer talked about. When they were crafting the bill, Leader Schumer and Senators Booker and Wyden, really stressed over and over again how they were being very deliberative and talking with the committees of jurisdiction, which I think was essentially every single committee. I think there's something like 14 Senate committees or something like that. Maybe I could be wrong on the exact number, but somewhere around there. And cannabis policy is going to end up touching on pretty much everything, right? I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody listening here. And so again, thinking about having those hearings, having those markups, having a more serious, in-depth conversation about what legalization is actually going to look like, I think that's how we'll be spending our time.
And I just wanted to mention, I worked on the Hill for over a decade. And to get into the mindset of a politician, politicians are risk averse. They don't like 50-50 issues. They love slam dunks. And to get something that's a slam dunk, the last thing a politician wants to do, and especially a senator, is get in front of a political movement. And, you saw this, you see this with cannabis, that it takes years to sort of mature and get people comfortable doing this. And as Michelle mentioned, you need this constant drumbeat. They need to hear from the public constantly from different angles, hearing from states, hearing from industry, hearing from stakeholders, seeing it in the news, constantly drumbeat about why reform is important and needed. And then they get this comfort level to say, okay, I'm good doing something like this. It takes years. I hate to say it, it takes years to build up to that level. And if you look back, it's one thing trying to push for a movement of something you believe in, whether that's education, the environment, transportation, whatever you believe in. It's another thing to take an issue that has been illegal for basically all of our lives, and then to change public opinion on that, and to change politicians like, hey, 80-year-old Joe Biden, you spent 40 years of your political life being opposed to cannabis. Now you have to change and be a supporter of cannabis. This is how, this is why. That takes a while for politicians to do that. And it's an evolution. It's a lot easier with a natural churn of older guys retire, young guys come in. But it is hard to have, especially older members of the Senate. And you just go through the list of the Chuck Grassley's and Dianne Feinstein's and even the Joe Bidens of the world. It's a slower process, and that's something we're up against. It's not just a matter of lobbying for your issue. It's changing the public perception of 50 years of this being illegal. Now let's change that, and let's tell you why we need legalization. And that's a little harder. And we all need resources. I'm one person. NCIA is one group. We just need, NCIA needs resources. We need member resources, and we need that constant drumbeat. The Hill needs to hear from the industry, stakeholders, and others constantly on this issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that, Michael. Yeah, we have a lot to cover in the rest of this episode. Before we take our next commercial break, we can't forget about the Safe Banking Act, the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. That particular bill has been running a marathon in the House of Representatives for years now, right? It's passed 7 times. So what is going on with the Safe Banking Act at the end of the year 2022 at this stage? And I'm also hearing about this new iteration called Safe Plus. Can you break that down for me?
Yeah, sure. So when I started in 2013, before there was really legalization and you had 1 state, 2 states, 3 states, 4 states, my strategy and the plan of cannabis at the time was, what can we do incrementally? What can Congress do to make it a little easier for the industry that's now legalizing at the state level to have their businesses sort of succeed in state legal as state legal entities. And we thought, okay, you pass the Safe Banking Act, let's work on that. The industry can go forward. Then Congress can spend the next 3, 5, 10 years worrying about legalization. Where now, here we are 9 years later, we have what, Michelle, 20 states, 18, 19, 20 states that are legal. And it's getting to a point to where now it's not only like incremental, it's getting past the point. Like we are so far past it, like we have to get this done and move on to the next bill. So we've been pushing SAFE since before it was called SAFE. Its original iteration was called the Marijuana Businesses Access to Banking Act way back in the time machine. And now, to me, it's low-hanging fruit. It's not a cannabis bill. It's a safety bill. It's a law enforcement bill. And at the same time, it's helping small businesses get access to financing. As you mentioned, Bethany, it's passed the House 7 different times. It's had hearings in the House. It's been talked about ad nauseum for years. It has, I think, 39 co-sponsors, 9 Republicans in the Senate. And if you know anything about Capitol Hill, very rarely do you get such bipartisan support on issues. And I'm really amazed because it is truly bipartisan. We've had about 90 to 100 Republicans supporting SAFE in the House. It's teed up and it's ready to go. But a lot of the issue is not just is SAFE good enough, but our advocates, friends in cannabis like Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker, who don't think SAFE goes far enough to address some of the harms in the war on drugs and have held it up. And it's very frustrating because to me personally, I think incremental reform leads to more reform. Everything is in baby steps versus you are going to accomplish and solve all of the issues of cannabis, the racism, and all the problems with the war on drugs in one fell swoop. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you are going to lose momentum if you pass something like SAFE. I think you are only going to gain momentum. And as you stabilize small businesses and you're able to grow as businesses, that leads to more money for reform. And that just is one more thing we've checked off the box that we can address when we go to reform. You mentioned SAFE Plus. SAFE Plus is basically this. You have the basis of SAFE, which makes it easier for the financial institutions to do business with the cannabis industry without really enforcement laws and worry about money laundering laws. SAFE Plus is a way to sweeten the pot for some, especially Democratic members, to add language in there. And Michelle can jump in. That makes it easier for Democrats to not just swallow SAFE, but to actually do a little more. And if, Michelle, you want to talk about some of the versions of what the pluses are out there that have sweetened the pot for some Democratic offices.
Sure, Mike. So, as we're recording this is about a week before whoever you are out there listening to this. So some things might have changed by the time you hear this recording. But as we're sitting right now, currently SAFE Plus, some of those inclusions have been talking about small business provisions, right? About allowing for cannabis-related small businesses to access funding from the Small Business Administration, which they are currently unable to do. Other provisions that have been talked about getting put in that SAFE Plus package are provisions related to CDFIs and MDIs, that's minority depository institutions, to protect those the same way that the banks and credit unions and other financial institutions in SAFE would be protected. And then there's also even been talk about some veterans provisions. Unfortunately, I'm not sure those are going to make it into this, even despite that this is a defense bill. But I digress. There's also talk about maybe putting something like the HOPE Act, which is a bill that allows for grant funding of expungements to at the state and local level to open up. And that's a bill that's been sponsored by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Congressman Dave Joyce in the House. Right. So that's one of those Democratic sweeteners as well. So a lot still in play. We'll see what ends up being Plus and SAFE Plus. Fingers crossed we get it done.
And as Michelle mentioned, quote unquote, as of this recording, Bethany. And so a lot is happening right now. And when the time this is released to the public, something could have happened, but a lot is brewing right now. We had expectations that after the election and before the new Congress comes in, that Congress would want to do something around SAFE, and we've seen a lot of action on this. And so it's a great time to be a lobbyist, a cannabis lobbyist. We're definitely outside of lobby days. Michelle and I are as busy as we've been this past year or two. And so just a lot going on, but this is what it's all for, is when that day happens, you have to be ready to strike. And a lot is happening right now, and fingers crossed that we can hopefully get something over the finish line, and maybe by the time people are hearing this, the news will be good. So we'll see, but fingers crossed.
Absolutely. All right, let's take our last commercial break, and then we will come back and wrap up this episode. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
Thank you for calling Navy Federal Credit Union. How can I help you?
Hi, if I'm in the Army, not in the Navy, am I still eligible for membership?
Yes, you are.
What about my sister in the Air Force?
Her too.
And my dad's a Marine.
We serve all branches of the military, veterans, and their families.
My dog is a retired military working dog.
I'll see what I can do.
Find out if you're eligible at NavyFederal.org. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. Insured by NCUA.
You're the one who protects the flock, and that requires an eye for detail. Because when safety and well-being are on the line, it's the details that can save lives. Even when no one else is watching, you see everything. Grainger gets you, and we're here for you, and all the ones who get it done with a wide range of safety products and solutions, plus board-certified safety consultants here to answer your questions. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
O'Reilly.
Protect your vehicle's engine with Syntec and O'Reilly Auto Parts. Syntec Premium Full Synthetic Motor Oil is formulated for today's engines to dissipate heat and reduce friction and wear. Right now, get 5 quarts of Syntec Full Synthetic and a MicroGuard Select Oil Filter for just $33.99. Try Syntec today, exclusively at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice, and we have just a couple minutes left to wrap up this chat here. I want to remind our listeners, especially NCIA members, that Lobby Days, our 11th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days, is coming up May 16th, 17th, and 18th, 2023. Definitely sponsorship packages available for companies that want to align yourself with that work that we're doing. And we also have an event calendar coming back. Yay! Our industry socials and a cannabis caucus will be leading us up from late January through May in 10, 11 cities across the country. So stay tuned for more information about these events. These are great evening networking receptions where you can mix and mingle with your fellow NCIA members, connect with NCIA staff, and keep the momentum going in our awesome industry. So Lobby Days is great. Speaking of all this great government relations stuff, we did see some White House action as well that I just want to mention it as well. One, President Joe Biden announced his administration would begin the process of decriminalizing cannabis and pardoning nonviolent cannabis offenses. Wow. To your point, many decades ago, Joe Biden was working against these issues, and now making an announcement like this is incredible. Also, the first piece of cannabis legislation to be sent to a president's desk, the medical research bill, was also recently signed by President Joe Biden. Wow, right? What are your reactions to this White House action on cannabis?
Well, it's twofold. One, it was truly, I want people to take a step back and really think about, it was historic, and regardless of your views of Joe Biden, and personally, he could have done this his first day in office on Inauguration Day. He could have campaigned on cannabis. He could have said this. It could have been a big, historic, this is our view on cannabis. So from that end, it's frustrating. They hadn't signaled much. And anytime the White House did signal around cannabis, it was usually not positive. So I was a little surprised. But with that being said, regardless of their motives or the politics or whatever you want about it, the president of the United States basically, for the first time in history, said, hey, I want to review this. Let's start this process. So that was truly historic. The fact that he said he was going to start the process of expunging records. And if you know cannabis, most of the arrests for cannabis at the federal level are going to be around trafficking. No one is really getting arrested at the federal level for small possession. Most of those are happening at the state level. But the fact that he used the opportunity from a messaging standpoint to talk about the need for governors to start this process is also truly historic. You know, we talk about the bully pulpit of the White House being able to at least message around that. I think that's historic. I think it says a lot. And as far as the research bill, you know, anyone who is listening to this show is probably knows the history of cannabis. We all know the benefits of this plant. And a research bill is so 10 years ago, but the fact that Congress finally got around to doing a research bill shows you how slow things work in Congress. And Michelle can talk about, you know, the details of the bill or the history, but even one little provision, there was a House version and the Senate version, and the Senate version allowed for only one facility, the University of Mississippi, to provide the cannabis for research, whereas the House version allowed for the state medical systems to provide for the cannabis, and that wouldn't even pass. And so, Michelle, if you want to talk about that, but it's historic, and at the same time, it goes to show you how slow the process is around cannabis, that in 2022, we are high-fiving each other because a research bill passed.
Yeah, we're almost out of time with our dear listeners here, but just quickly, Mike, you summed it up pretty well. The House version of that bill, the research bill, had initially said the cannabis that the research is going to be done on could come from a dispensary, right? So what people are actually consuming, the more conservative, if you will, Senate version said, no, you still need to get it from Ole Miss, which is where research grade cannabis is currently gotten from. And so at the end of the day, that's still where it's going to have to come from, but they did open up how you can do research. So it is still a great first step forward.
We'll take what we can get as it comes along, right? All right. Thank you both for taking the time to catch us up a little bit on what's been happening in the year 2022 and get us excited to wrap up this year and kick off 2023. And we'll see what kind of progress we can make in this slow but forward motion one way or the other with cannabis policy reform. Appreciate your time. Looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. in May, if I don't see you in person before then. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning into another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice. Until next time.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.
This holiday, whether you're making a Kroger Simple Truth Turkey for 40 or a Murray's Baked Brie for 2, Kroger has fast, fresh delivery and free pickup, so you can make holiday meals that bring you all together to create memories that last. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Free pickup on orders of $35 or more. Restrictions may apply.
Get more ways to save at the Buy 5 or More Save $1 each sale. Just buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
What's that place you've always wanted to try? Well, you're there, sharing plates with
just one bite.
Or on second thought, maybe not sharing. It's that good. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.